Oh wow, look, I'm wearing clothing for one of these. The theme was too much to avoid when they saw this dirty shirt on my floor. So, anyway, I played the expansion for High Frontier, and this is pretty much what you get. You get the map, and you get a few cards. Probably less than half of all of these. However, and you already have the rules. There isn't much. There's 1, 2, 3. No. There's really 2 pages of rules and a couple of scenarios that are really briefly laid out. It was a hard time for me to convince myself to buy this because I actually put the order in after I had started the basic game, but before I finished it, and I kind of debated whether or not I had made it all a good idea all along. It seems almost impossible that that little amount of rules, that another map, whatever, could change the game so much, but it totally has for me. I'm not saying this is one of my favorite games. It certainly isn't. However, I couldn't see a point. I couldn't see what the target audience was at all for the basic game alone. Whereas I get some enjoyment out of the advanced game, and I can definitely think of a few people that I've known in my life who would have really loved it. So I guess one of the biggest things is the original struck me as this tremendously complex Euro game. It had a lot of the same feature, well, the basic game. I think the original game is the whole thing. I think it was designed as one game, and there was kind of this weird marketing decision of, oh, we can cut it like this, and it'll be a little bit more attractive at $40 than the $60 level. And that's understandable. I just don't think, I think somebody who buys the basic game may be really, really unhappy with it, whereas they might enjoy the advanced game. On the other hand, there may be people who like the basic game. I've come to some thoughts about that. So, if you love complex planning, and you want that in a Euro, and you're willing to, you know, maybe spend 3-4 hours on a Euro, the basic game may be playable to you. I don't see that as a very big target audience at all. And I don't know how many people they're going to hook on that, which is kind of why I say I think it should just be packaged as one game. And for me, the basic game served as a reasonable training. It taught me how to move, but not enough of the movement to really get movement completely in the advanced game, because building your rocket, etc., is very, very different. You need these new components, the support units, etc. One thing that I noticed is with the additional number of components, it becomes a bigger deal where you might actually have to set up a couple of factories near each other, and then you can go and pick up components to do other actions. You can really take the planning to a tremendous level in the advanced game, where I don't think that's possible in the basic game. I think, however, the game overall becomes a lot longer, which for a lot of players is kind of a total deal breaker. For me, it's actually an advantage, although I did get kind of fatigued because of the level of decision making involved in it. But I felt the first game ended too quickly. I felt like I spent a lot of time not doing much at all, and then bang, it's over. In this game, I felt like I spent a lot of time doing nothing at all, which is, you know, the cards discarding, trying to build a rocket that'll work, and then maybe getting so frustrated that you try to launch one that won't work, or so unaware of what you're doing. But I think I was able to enjoy a certain level of building that maybe wouldn't be there, well, that couldn't be there in the basic game. In the sense that once I got something built up, I still need a big rocket, and it's tough to get that together. I mean, if I throw the whole thing back into my hand, then it's going to be expensive to launch, and events might end up pulling parts of it out of my hand. On the other hand, if I try to bring that home, that takes a while too. And I probably can't bring it home if I needed those components to build my factories or whatever. Okay, so I found out on one of my earlier videos, somebody said the living rules contain a change on how the support cards are handled. That when you buy a card, you no longer get all the support cards. I can understand why that was done in the rules. I think the rules are really, really questionable the way they're written. But I think that one can come up with an answer to those rules, and it makes a game with a little bit more luck, in the sense that, oh wow, if I buy this card, I can look at this card, but I can't look at what's going to come up, what all the effects of what I buy are really going to be. It also makes certain card buys more valuable, and I think that speeds the game up because it gets money into people's hands quicker. It gets people piles of cards that now they have to do something with. Now maybe that's just sell them, but it may be, hey, whoa, I can use this. I wasn't even thinking about this, but now that it's in my hand, I can rebuild my rocket a different way. And that's, I think, a really cool feature of it. And I'd kind of be loath to give that up. I think I'm going to keep playing with the rules as I've got them written, because I think that's actually one of the charming features in this long version. Still, I've got my problems, which are, it's not a great game for me, especially solo. The decision making is too deep. I'm not good at making this kind of decision and this number of decisions. And I know a lot of people who are worse than I am who will just want to say, oh hell, let me see if this works, and fire something off that minimally might make it, but has low odds. They may well construct a non-optimal rocket with the resources that they have available or see on the board. Because these are all very Eurogamer type things, trying to optimize what there is and get that extra victory point over everyone else that you can get off of that. These are very much the kind of thoughts that are in here. So if you like Euro decision making and can handle a very, very heavy game, this is definitely very heavy for the Euro style, not heavy compared to the big war games. This is definitely a good choice because the decision making is really, really deep. It's also hard because I'm playing more than one, and I specifically try to segment my brain and discard everything I know. So there's a lot of quick actions that require focus and a lot of thought. I can do that in XX, which I think is a little lighter decision making than this. Maybe because I'm so used to doing XX, I can't do that well in here. I've still got my gripes about the space versus thrust argument. Or time versus thrust, or distance versus thrust, or whatever you want to say. I can understand making the design decision that thrust is more important than time, but our intuitive minds, as humans, think of time. Time and distance are ultimately related when you start going into space. If Saturn is away from us in that direction across the sun, it takes a lot longer to get there, and it's just that simple. I don't care what your thrust is, you got more distance to cover, it's going to be a factor. Time does not work well with the model that was presented. I understand the design decision to say, okay, you know, if I'm trying to figure out how much thrust to get from point A to point B, it doesn't actually matter that much how far apart they are, because some of these constant positioning, some of these positionings remain fairly constant. So I can represent it with this kind of map. But no, it just doesn't work. It really doesn't. And you have to kind of say, okay, time is just this bunch of bullshit in this game. I'm not just talking about each turn is a year, which could just be debatable, and you could say, wow, somebody forced him to write that in. Time is in the game. Time has an effect on the game in terms of the pulsing of when the comets are available, in terms of just a whole bunch of things. The human activities require time at the very least. And the fact that these two models don't mesh well together within, you know, the simplistic level that we have here means that you're going to walk away from the game saying, wow, that's just all wrong. And I still feel that. It's all wrong. But I don't think that means it's a terrible game. I think that in the advanced game, there is a game that's good enough that if my decision-making capabilities were a little bit better, I would really like, I think. I'm not sure still how big a market there is for this, though. That's what troubles me. I mean, clearly, if you're really, really into the concept here, the theme of this game, there's nothing else at this level. There's stuff that's got that has simplified movement, and I'd say Battlefleet Mars is actually simplified compared to this, because you worry about point A to point B, you don't worry about, and maybe gravitational distortions, but you don't worry about the full effect of them and how that maps out on the solar system. And this actually does. So there are a lot of things you can learn from this game that I think could be of great interest to some people. The game presents a ton of information, especially on the inventions. You know, these are all reasonable projections from someone who's an expert in the field, and I think that's a very big plus in the game. The minus, though, for me, the biggest minus is the playability of it, because my little brain doesn't work that well. And the second is there is this big disconnect. Now, there's always going to be things that you say, well, that ain't how that works. That's stupid. I mean, line of sight in Terrible Swift Sword was that way. Doesn't mean I didn't love the game, but you could do some really dumb things. I feel this one's a little more extreme. It's not like, oh, they just didn't really think that through completely. It's, they looked at it and said, we can't figure this out, and walked away from it. Or we can't figure this out in a way that would be at all playable. That's disappointing to me. That's very disappointing to me. But I do think that there's some very, very interesting mechanics in the game. And as a game itself, it's pretty interesting. I don't think it's all that terribly innovative. But I do think that the amount of decision making in putting together a rocket is really interesting. The things you can balance off. It's just so easy to fail. I think that's kind of the biggest problem for me. If it were a little bit more forgiving, I'd be a little bit more willing to say, you know, this game would be better. I would be better at this game if I could make more planning, but I can play it without planning. But when I send something out and I forgot a piece or something, and I got to go all the way back and start over again, that's not very forgiving, and that's hard for me to cope with. All right, and let this one up.